Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Automate and Win, Secure, Reliable, Compliant Disclosure Fulfillment Outsourcing. My name is Caitlin McNally, and I'm an event coordinator here at Confluent Strategies. During this hour, we will be talking with John Keilholz, Regina Lawrence, and Christina Meredith of Hancock Whitney Bank and Josh McAfee of Confluent Strategies. We will be discussing how Hancock Whitney Bank found operational efficiency through automating many of their consumer lending disclosures. Before we get started, we will go over a few housekeeping items. To have the best experience during this webinar, I highly recommend closing any windows you have open or closing down any applications you have running. These can impact the quality and performance overall. We will also have a couple of polls for you to interact with our speakers throughout the webinar, so keep an eye out for those. These polls will pop up on your screen when launched, and all you have to do is select an answer to participate. If you'll direct your attention to your screens, we'll go ahead and test one right now. Which regulatory notice creates the most burden for your compliance team? You should see options on your screen, and we'll give everyone a minute to select one. Okay, it looks like everyone's answered, so we're going to go ahead and close that poll. The slides you're seeing today and the recording will be emailed to you after the webinar, so you don't have to worry about missing any content. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen. We will monitor these during the presentation, and we'll be sure to get to them during the Q&A section at the end. With that covered, we'll go ahead and hand it over to our speakers for today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joshua McAfee, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Strategy for Confluent Strategies. I recently joined our team in late March this year to support our marketing, our client success, and our association management teams. Prior to joining Confluent Strategies, I spent 8 years in executive leadership at 2 different credit unions. During that time, I was active in leadership at many of the industry trade associations and in various think tanks. I'm excited to have the opportunity to now be supporting banks and credit unions like yourselves through actionable insights from Equifax's wealth of consumer data. So most of you have very strong, long-lasting relationships with Confluent Strategies, but you may possibly view us exclusively as a credit reporting agency. And I'll share that while Equifax credit reporting remains at the center of the value that we provide to you, we also provide many strategic growth and risk solutions to support your overall loan and deposit portfolio. We're going to discuss a very innovative example of those solutions today, and it's actually an in-house solution that we developed in tandem with one of our clients, and we're very excited to show it to you. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and circle back on Equifax. Why Equifax? Well, here at Confluent Strategies, we believe very deeply in rewarding our clients with best-of-breed solutions. And Equifax continues to deliver the highest quality and quantity, which is very important, that quantity of consumer information, with the highest uptime and the most rapid response. And it's really that simple. Our company's reputation over the past 7 decades has been built on dependability and quality, and Equifax is really the only credit reporting solution suite that matches our personal standard of excellence here at our company. And we hope that you as clients have felt that as well.
We're interested to know what level of experience our attendees on the call today have with automated disclosures before we begin. So let's take another quick poll. How many of you currently outsource production of your regulatory notices? This may be all of your disclosures or only one, but we're interested in your approach. Please take a moment to log a response in our on-screen poll. It looks like everyone has submitted their answers, so we'll close the poll and turn it back over to Josh.
Thanks, Caitlin. So before we begin our interview with our featured guests this morning, I'd like to provide a brief overview of disclosure fulfillment, and I don't think there's anyone better to do that than our friend Karen Harris, who is our sales executive over our Mississippi field territory. So to assist with that overview, I'd like to introduce you to Karen. Karen, you on the line with us?
I am. Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate that. As you know, it's no secret that financial institutions have experienced a wave of new regulations since the financial downturn of 2008. As a small to medium-sized institutions, most of you have had to shoulder the burden of implementing those regulatory changes without the manpower or budgetary firepower of the market players who caused the problem. One of the areas where both your effort and expense have increased a lot in compliance disclosure. Providing notice about terms and conditions now requires its own department and cost center for most financial institutions. The question we're trying to answer today is, how might you stay true to your charter of serving your market's needs and building shareholder equity while also meeting your compliance obligations? Here at Confluent Strategies, we saw the need of one such client who was burdened by the cost and effort of providing notices to their customers. We built a cost-effective and reliable automation that allows them to dedicate more of their personnel and resources to activities that reward their customers and shareholders. We'll speak in more detail about this during the interview, but as an overview, Hancock Whitney securely sends Confluent Strategies a regular file extract containing the information we need to send their their notices. We retain their artwork and their compliance approved language, and our team is responsible for producing, processing, and posting their notices they've delivered according to Hancock Whitney legal obligation. That's really it. It's not a groundbreaking product, but as you'll learn when we get into our conversation with John and his team, the value we provide is layered on the top of the trust and security that our clients feel when working with our known brand at an affordable price.
Thank you, Karen. We're so proud to have you aboard with us today. Karen has spent many years with our company, and she's an incredibly respected member of our team, both by our colleagues here at Confluent and by her clients, as you'll find with the Hancock Whitney team. And with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters and our esteemed guests, John Keilholz, who's the Senior Vice President of Consumer Lending, Regina Lawrence, who's the Senior VP of Director of Consumer Lending Risk, and Christina Meredith, who is the Associate VP of Consumer Lending and a Risk Supervisor. So just to give a little bit of time for folks to put faces with names and get a little bit of backstory, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Keilholz, and Josh, first of all, I'd like to thank y'all. Confluent Strategies has been a partner of ours for many years, and just appreciate this opportunity to partner with y'all and getting this information out. So I've actually been with Hancock Bank for about 25 years, have started in the recovery department and worked my way up through the retail banking organization, and currently under my management is the consumer lending book, which includes also small business. Hancock Whitney actually is we're about 27 billion. We stretch from Houston, Texas, through Jacksonville, Florida, down to Tampa, and we also have offices in Nashville for medical finance, and as well as trust offices in New York. So we have grown mightily in the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years, and looking to expand more.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Regina, tell us a little bit about your background and the role you play with Hancock Whitney.
Certainly, and thank you, Josh. Good morning, everybody. I've been with Hancock Bank for 35 years, but I started with another so I'm the old person of the group, but I started with a much smaller institution. So I've seen both sides of this equation, and I've seen Hancock Whitney grow very, very quickly and quite in size. When I started out, everything was manual. the small institution I was with, played many roles in both institutions, and everything was very, very manual. Like John, I've kind of started and moved around the organization, played many different roles, was director for our operations area here at Hancock Whitney. I'll talk a little more about that at another point. But that had a major input onto what happened here with Confluent Strategies and these notices during a merger we'll talk about. But I've moved in a lot of different places, enjoyed a lot of different associations within the bank, and hopefully we can provide a little insight about us and learn a little bit about you. But the partnership with Confluent Strategies all the way through, in the many ways that they help us, has just been invaluable to meeting all of our corporate goals. So thank you very much. Look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Regina. And finally, Christina, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. I've been with Hancock Whitney Bank for 11 years now. I've worked in various departments as well, including lending services, compliance, and now consumer lending risk. So I have partnered with Confluent Strategies in multiple departments for multiple years now. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you all. Again, we're really happy to have you with us today, and we're happy to have you as attendees with us as well. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So John's told us just a little bit about Hancock Whitney, but John, I'm gonna ask you to dig in just a little bit here and tell me a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of really what Hancock Whitney is after in terms of business objectives today in 2018. So tell me a little bit about your primary market, some of those business priorities that you guys have, especially in your area, and what's something that people may not know about Hancock Whitney.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Hancock Whitney, about 27 billion, running from Houston through Jacksonville, Florida. Our primary market's really Mississippi and Louisiana. That's where Hancock Bank, prior to the merger, is based out of Gulfport, Mississippi. That's actually where our corporate headquarters are. And then Whitney Bank was headquartered out of Louisiana, New Orleans. And so those are really, when you look at the majority of our portfolio is in those two states. In looking at business objectives, I mean, we are a full service bank. So we offer indirect financing, commercial products, trust, wealth management, and consumer. So we've got the full gamut of every, product and line of business out there. As far as my group is concerned, it's strictly consumer and small business, which are two significant focuses of the banks over the next, I'd say, 3 to 5 years, is growing the consumer book as well as the small business book. And small business, we define as those businesses that really generate $1 million in revenue and less. So that's kind of, if we look over the next 3 to 5 years, that's the focus. And again, within that book, as the regulatory environment changes, we are looking for really more and more automation, more consistency, as much streamlined processes as we can get to kind of avoid I guess the best thing is consistency, making sure that we have everybody's treated exactly the same, whether it's notices, whether it's decisions, regardless of what it is.
I would imagine that at an organization of your size, consistency becomes a major challenge, because to have a workforce, a lending workforce that is as distributed as your workforce is, getting everybody rowing in the same direction on any type of policy compliance or procedural compliance would be incredibly difficult. Would that be true?
Absolutely, and that's where we look for whether it's systems or partnering with individuals like Confluent Strategies to get those processes as automated and as consistent and easy as possible, to kind of avoid those disruptions within the processes that could cause that inconsistency.
Josh, it's Regina. Along those same lines, you mentioned systems. we do have multiple systems that our bank is dealing with across these markets. John's mentioned small business. We've got the large commercial. We've got a mortgage portfolio. We've got the regular consumer loans. And so we're dealing with a number of different systems as well. Again, this functionality that Confluent has been able to afford us ensures that any notices that we need to get sent from whatever the source system can be, we can get those sent over there, and they've been able to help us stay that consistency as we've spoken. So very important.
Well, and I think that's tremendous. You know, that you guys had the foresight to say, you know, rather than trying to hem in this distributed workforce and drop the hammer, so to speak, we're going to identify a process-based or a system-based efficiency that really allows us to provide some tighter control. So, Regina, you know, I know we're kind of firing the Wayback Machine up a little bit here, but can you give us a little bit of insight into the beginning of the relationship? How did automating disclosure fulfillment begin between Confluent Strategies and Hancock?
Certainly, and as I think you mentioned earlier, Josh, we've had a relationship via the Equifax and the credit reporting for many, many years with Confluent. But in 2011, actually it was the end of 2010, but in 2011, that was the merger point. We were merging two banks of equal size. Each one was roughly $10–11 billion. Hancock at the time was the lead, so we had the operational challenge of putting these two banks together operationally. At that point in time, I was serving in the capacity of corporate operations director for lending and deposit services. The idea of continuing the manual process that both we and Whitney Bank had at the time to do most of their notices, and when I say manual, and some of you banks may know exactly what I'm talking about, we had the mail notices, machines, the folders. In some cases, we didn't have folders. In some areas, we were actually manually folding and stuffing envelopes. We were putting stamps on our postage, and we had these in multiple different locations. This became an absolute nightmare. One of the benefits of any merger, of course, is a synergy of operations, an efficiency of operations, and we had a tremendous obligation to our shareholders, of course, as well in the markets, to keep the efficiency ratio very, very low. And when we started, I'll be honest, it was not where we wanted it to be when we merged those two banks. So we had a long way to go. One of the ways we were able to do this through automation, Karen Harris and her team, Confluent Strategies, came to us and said, hey, we can help you with these notices. And it seemed at the time, that's only a little bit, but oh my goodness, it's helped us tremendously to meet some very major corporate goals and continue that shareholder value, get our efficiency ratio down. The idea of doing that manually was crazy. We just could not have kept up with it, let alone the consistency of that. So that partnership has helped us scale our operations back, continue to be able to grow. It doesn't matter. Confluent can handle, if we doubled our size, they can handle that volume in the same timely manner. We could never have done that with the way we were trying to do that on a given day. We'd have never gotten the notices out.
Well, so, a merger of equals is, for the folks on the call who have never been through something like that, you can't really even describe the lift from an operations perspective on completing that type of a task, and especially at your scale, individually and now as a consolidated organization. That's such a significant effort for two equal-sized institutions to combine assets and operations. But it's easy today, 7 years removed from that original engagement. It's easy to forget at all-time low unemployment, at wage growth, at full economic recovery, to remember that in 2011, while we were in recovery in the early stages, margins were tremendously compressed. Consumer demand was still fairly low. Most financial institutions out there were really struggling and grasping to figure out how do we stimulate net interest margin? How do we stimulate net income and really drive growth when the large sum of the population is not coming along with us in that effort? So, I think it's tremendous that you guys saw that opportunity and were willing to take that. So again, I think it's fantastic that that this has worked well for you. So with that in mind, I want to kind of turn to Christina for a moment. And Christina, tell me a little bit about what concerns had to at the initial stage and even today have to be addressed when you're outsourcing delivery of these notices. So I know you guys. It has to be said that you're giving up a little bit of that transparency and control when you work with an outside provider. So how do you balance that with the obligation that you have to meet?
Well, there is an expectation that as a bank we will perform due diligence on every third-party vendor that we have. Confluent Strategy really partners with us to provide information that we need when we request it. So as the first line of defense, we often do forward-looking reviews to ensure that in real time these notices are being delivered in a timely manner and have the required information included, and that we are doing audits ourselves. But when we also have various departments come in, compliance, audit, sometimes regulators, that also want to look at these notices as ensure these same things are occurring. And we are able to partner with Confluent Strategies, request information for our various lines of business and receive quick documentation that these notices are accurate and delivered timely.
That's to me that is where the rubber really meets the road, is when you've completed the implementation, the setup, the systems are working, the ongoing testing that has to take place. I would imagine for an organization of your size, both the internal and external audits and the ongoing federal examinations that take place are pretty rigorous. So basically what I'm hearing is that the reporting that's being supplied to be able to help you demonstrate that that you're meeting that obligation has to be proactive. It's got to be ongoing, and it has to be fairly detailed. Is that an accurate statement?
That is accurate. And Confluent Strategies also assist with some record retention on some of these notices for us.
Fantastic. And just to call, I know we've covered this a couple times already, but at an organization that's approaching $30 billion in total assets across about a 5-6 state footprint, for the notices that we're providing for you guys, that volume can range anywhere from about 8,000 to 15,000 notices a month. So that's a lot of folks that have to receive notice from your organization in some form or fashion. So keeping track of that is a major concern, because that's a large portion of the population. So continuing that thought, I know we're 7 years removed from the initial setup, but we have done some subsequent implementations since that original project stand-up. Tell me a little bit about some of your recent work.
Well, we recently identified an opportunity to automate the delivery of our privacy notices for our indirect customers. And because of our existing relationship with Confluent Strategies, we had many of those system interfaces already in place. We had 3 meetings to establish the process that would occur, and after the 3 meetings, we had a game plan, and within 2 weeks of that 3rd meeting, we had the process in place and functioning as delivering these privacy notices to our customers in an automated fashion.
That's right, Christina. And there was also very recently, in the last couple of years, another merger. It was a much smaller scale merger But still, there were a few more notices that had to go out very quickly. Again, that scalability that Confluent Strategies can afford us with this automation, it was not even noticed. It just happened seamlessly. Another area that we even more recently went through, even though it's 7 years since the actual merger, for many reasons, including the franchise names were very important in Mississippi and Louisiana. It took us this long until we felt comfortable in actually combining the name of the bank into one institution, Hancock Whitney. That was no easy task. It was a huge project that went on for many months, and a lot of that had to do with a logo. Our marketing department came up with a brand new logo. Neither one of the two original logos looked anything like our present logo. All of our notices, all of our statements, everything that went out from a legal and from a marketing perspective had to change. As you can imagine, that was no small task. Again, Confluent Strategy was able to jump in with these 15, 20,000 notices and very quickly, very quickly, be able to turn the artwork around to where marketing was very happy with it, get all the notices tested, get us the copies that we were requiring for the project. It was an amazing task, and having worked with several other areas and several other vendors during that process, I wish I could say it went as smoothly, but it very frequently did not go quite that smoothly. So they were just great partners. Great partners.
Yeah, and Josh, let me add to Regina's point. In my position and kind of the areas that I oversee, not having to worry about Confluent Strategies hitting a deadline. So we have been Confluent Strategies has been very good about working with other vendors. Confluent Strategies is an organization we do not have to worry about. It's one of our vendors that we know will hit timelines and hit everything that we need, the requirements. And so, this is, that's kudos to y'all's organization, because as Regina said, that there were other vendors that did not have as quick a response. But we have found, regardless of the notice, regardless of the situation, we're able to call on Karen and the team and really, hey, here's what we need. They work very well with other vendors. They work very well with our internal team. And typically on situations where there could be lots of bumps and obstacles, typically we do not find that with anything that we do with Confluent Strategies, particularly with these notices.
That's incredibly important to call out, and I love the fact that you guys that you've just been through this this incredibly sizable merger process, because it provides a tremendous amount of subjectivity about the lead time that it takes to accomplish a task. And I think it does speak to, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm fairly new to Confluent myself, but having come out of the banking space, you initiate these projects with a bit of dread and regret, because you know that the stated lead time can often be pole vaulted by the actual delivery time. What a supplier says they will do is often extended, by an exponential factor. They may say 6 to 8 weeks, and then it becomes 6 to 8 months. But what I'm hearing from you guys is over the course of 3 meetings over about 4 to 8 weeks, we were able to implement these additional notices and the brand change as a result of the merger completion. And that really points to a couple things: the intuitiveness and the comprehension that our team on this side has, and the relationship that our two companies have had over an extended period of time to understand and to operate with a certain degree of shorthand. So I appreciate you guys calling that out, because I do think that's a very unique relationship and dynamic. So tell us a little bit about a typical cycle. So from an operational perspective, compared with that historical process that was very lick and stick, so to speak, for your notices, what does that typical cycle look like today? What does a week in the life look like outsourcing these disclosures today?
I think today we have automated processes in place that allow these files to be sent to Confluent, whether on a nightly basis or on a weekly basis, so that we don't have personnel that have to touch each application to make the decision to send it to Confluent. It's an automated process. There's no judgment behind it. It goes to Confluent. The notice is delivered in a timely manner. It contains all of the information from the system, because the system is automated populating these disclosures for us. And there's no concerns, there's no worries. We know that that customer will receive that notice with the correct information and in a timely manner.
You know, I geek out a little bit over this because you use the term automation, and really our entire pretext for this call is that you are automating your disclosures. So our automation is inside of your system automation. It's almost like one of those Russian nesting eggs. So you know, Regina, you mentioned earlier in the call that you've got a distributed range of different legacy platforms that your staff works from. I know that a lot of the folks on the call may be thinking, well, you know, Hancock Whitney, $27 billion in assets. They probably have one proprietary system that everything flows through, and they generate all of their notices out of their secret system. And from what I understand from you, that's not necessarily the case.
No, it is. We only wish. We only wish. It would seem that way with banks, dollar-wise, that we're as, quote, big as we are. But a lot of the early pieces of that implementation had to do more with how do we put it together, and where do we put our dollars as far as keeping our shareholders happy. There weren't a lot of leftover extra dollars to just change systems and get some fancy whiz-bang state-of-the-art system in place for any of our functions, unfortunately. What Confluent has been able to assist us with is to take processes, not just systems, but processes irrespective of how, in some cases, antiquated some of those systems may still be, unfortunately. We still look to get that state-of-the-art system everywhere, but we're not there yet. Mergers take a long time. A merger this big takes an extra long time. And the priorities that our executive management has to look at aren't necessarily things like a system that may not turn around the dollars very quickly. Our shareholder value, our scalability is most important. So we had to look at innovative ways to take what we had and make it work. And that's where this partnership with Confluent Strategies, not just in notices, but in many other ways. It's a continuous cycle of how do we do it better? How do we do it better? How do we do it better? So it's not, as Josh said, it's not one and done. We didn't just fix one thing and life is great. We are continually looking for ways even to make the process today that exists, if it needs to be changed or increased in value or made better, we continue to look to Confluent to help us do that. So when we have one system for our small business lending, another system of applications for our commercial lending, which sometimes still need an adverse action letter. We have a system for our consumer lending, underwriting. All of those, although independently are automated themselves to make the decision, can now feed to Confluent Strategies from 5 different states and have those notices go out on that particular day. So I only wish that we had that system, Josh. Maybe one of these days we're going to get it. But right now, we often have to Band-Aid, and there's no better partner than Confluent Strategies for that. Josh?
I'm sorry, I did this on the last call. I muted for just a moment, and
okay, I thought I lost the call.
It gets us every time. So you know, I'll say this: it is both, you know, kind of one of those wish fors for just about all institutions out there to have one source of truth, but it's not. Honestly, it's just not a reality. And what you guys are speaking to is that, irrespective of having a proprietary dream platform, you guys have these different best of breed in their own respective category systems, But irrespective of the distribution of all those different systems, what you've been able to do is present a unified front, a unified voice for your customers, which is really what most organizations reach for, is for your customers to not feel a negative impact of having different systems and processes.
Exactly.
And I think that's incredibly important, that as an organization you focused on that. So, with that in mind, we start to think about all of the efficiency that's been gained as a result of this automation. So, when I think about that can either present itself in either additional net income to the bottom line, or it may simply be that it frees your workforce up to do different, more important, more articulate things that they might not have been able to do when these disclosures were looming over their heads. So I know a lot of organizations, when they think about outsourcing, they think about the human capital impact of that. Well, if we outsource, those are jobs, those are livelihoods, those are paychecks that go away. And that's not necessarily the case, as I understand from you guys. Those were folks that you were able to put into more tactical positions.
That's exactly right, Josh, and thank you for bringing that up. Our company feels very strongly about employees. I know most companies do. You take a situation we had with the merger years ago, and the size of an operations area, and you need to get the efficiencies from the combination, but you have individuals that have been there for years and years and years and years, and we're concerned about that. We don't want anyone to lose a job because we've automated or put banks together. So from all perspectives of the corporation, we're looking at ways to redeploy from the merger, from this automation, from all the automation and outsourcing that we do. We're able to take, as Josh said, people and redeploy, if you will, train them into some different areas. And in addition to that, as some areas go away, these manual processes, for example, in lending services to fold notices, go away, the company is now building new departments, new worlds. We're expanding our own horizons from a corporate standpoint. So the opportunities that are available to people only continue to grow. If people are interested, there's a way to do it, and nobody is being displaced simply because we're finding a way to do a process better, a standard, a mundane process that's done over and over and over again. Now it's automated rather than a person doing it. So, hey, I can go somewhere else. I can not out of the organization, somewhere else within the organization, and take on some new challenges. Christina and I and John have all done that at various times in our careers, moved from department to department, departments that didn't exist. One example is consumer lending risk. Didn't exist prior to the merger. The regulatory environment changed. Christina and I were both in lending services. We were both in compliance at a later state. And then here we are now in a completely different function, forming a new group with John's help to focus on something that becomes more important to the organization than anything we could have done, folding statements, for example. This help of automation does not mean, or outsourcing does not mean, your employees don't have jobs by any stretch of the imagination.
So, I think that's, if every organization were to peel back the layers of the onion and say, what do they want for their people? It's really to become specialists rather than generalists. And we know that every role is important, even if it involves licking and sticking, so to speak. But
absolutely.
But at the same time, you want for your folks to be able to think and act as strategically as possible, and that's really what we're trying to drive here. So, with that in mind, what do we think about the future? What's next? What type of thought for Hancock Whitney has this type of opportunity spurred on? What does the future hold? And maybe John, that may be to you.
Yeah, and I think as you look in our organization, as we look to grow business, there's no way that, I shouldn't say there's no way. It would be very costly for us as we grow our production base and have to send out additional notices, it becomes prohibitive to grow business because I'd have to add a staff internally to handle all those notices. So what Confluent Strategies is able to do is I can grow my business without having to worry about growing an internal staff to do all this. So as we look to the future, not having that expense base of personnel and copy machines and whatever else that takes to print out notices, I'm able to take the capital that I would have used on that and spend it to grow business and use Confluent Strategies to make up for that volume. So as we look, kind of the future, I'm not sure. We've automated all, basically all our notices, but as the compliance environment, we all know the compliance environment will change. That's a given. If not today or tomorrow, next year or what have you. So as we will look for those opportunities, whether it's a notice or whether it's a customer letter or whatever you may have, to partner with Confluent Strategies, again, so I can use the capital that I have to grow my business as opposed to having to spend money to send out a regulatory notice.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that is important there, and that's that the relationship isn't necessarily hamstrung by regulatory notice. If as an organization you find that there is some type of operational notice that may not be driven by regulatory compliance, but may be an upcoming known outage or system turnover that requires a letter or something of that sort. It may even be promotionally related. You have that connectivity with the relationship to be able to say, we have this file, we can transmit it securely without having to establish and vet a new provider, and we need to leverage that because the cost is favorable to be able to do something like that. So I think that's fantastic to be able to call that out.
What I'd add to that too, Josh, is there's no doubt within our organization that if we had to have a notice go out, and this isn't bashing any other vendor, but if we had to have a notice that needed to go out quickly, the first choice is always Confluent Strategies, because we know there's that partnership, there's the turnaround time, and there's no doubt in anybody within our organization, Confluent Strategies' ability to make that turnaround as quickly as what we need it. And so if you look, to your point, it may be another notice that has nothing to do with regulatory, but if that's a notice that's important enough to our organization that we have to have a quick turnaround time, again, Confluent Strategies is at the top of the list to be able to do that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, the speed aspect. I think we had it on screen, but it's important to call it out that I believe our SLA with you guys is about 48 hours. So from the time we receive the file until the time it's being dropped is about 2 days. So that's the knowledge that with limited exception, when you're sending a batch to us, that your customers are likely receiving it in their mailboxes within 5 to 7 business days, which is, to me, that's positive vibes all around, to know that the notice is relevant, which is in keeping a customer's experience top of our focus. That's an important thing. So I think that's fantastic. Well, guys, I want to give each of you an opportunity to kind of have the last word here. And again, thank you for your candor and for sharing as much as you did. Are there any other thoughts from any of you?
No, I would just again take this opportunity, Josh, to thank you and Karen and the group for partnering with us, and you're exceptional partners, and we really appreciate the opportunity to participate. And if there's anything we can do, just let us know.
I think we all second that emotion, John. But if there's any questions that we can answer, we're happy to do that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin once more, and I think she's got some additional things as we close up today.
Yes, thank you, John, Regina, Christina, and Josh. If you guys will just direct your attention to your screens, we're going to do one final quick poll. We would like to know if compliance disclosure automation is something you would be interested in hearing more about. So if you guys could just take a moment to give us some feedback there. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that poll. And now we're going to take some time for questions. Just a reminder to type into your questions into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. And it does look like we do have a few questions now. The first one is, are you sending delinquency notices prior to 30 days and again after 30 days?
Yes, we are. We send a notice at about 10 or 15 days after they've basically perhaps might be looking at a late charge on their loan. We'll send that first notice, send it again after 30 days. And that's in addition to the billing notice that had gone out prior to the actual due date of the loan.
And is it possible for Confluent Strategies to produce and deliver welcome letters to our new customers?
I'll take
Absolutely.
that one.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Josh, because absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, really, like we were talking about there toward the end, the data connection is it varies from client to client, obviously, based on the system that you have. But without going into tremendous detail, effectively, the relationship that we have with clients like Hancock Whitney is we have a secure file transfer protocol or an SFTP, and we're exchanging files over that secure connection. So so for that particular example, like a welcome letter, what we would need is just a periodic file that that shows who your new customers are that you want to welcome, and then we'd settle on the artwork that you're looking for, and then we'd merge that data in and we'd produce that according to whatever your delivery requirements are.
We've got one more here. Are you sending loan estimates and initial lending disclosures?
No, those we don't do with the help of Confluent Strategies at this point. Those are coming directly out of our loan documentation centers. So those are something handled a little differently. Not to say they couldn't do it, but that's just not the way it's working presently.
It looks like we've covered all of our questions. Josh, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
I don't believe so. I think we've covered everything, and I want to thank our attendees for sharing those questions. Those were great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate everyone being here today. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Confluent Strategies, and we will see you all again next time.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.